Ahm Zadik in the building, so I'm gonna let them introduce themselves to the listener audience.
Um, Chief Naftali Ben Dan, aka Naftali David, uh, Chairman of Ahm Zadik.
All honor and praise to the Most High God, always top down. One of the only second, also in the teachers, the congregation, also, providing all honors and praises to the Most High God, King of the universe. I'm Zach Harvin Dan, also one of the members of one of the founders members of Ahm Zadik, and also one of the teachers over at Congregation Baby.
So I saw the video, and for those that didn't get a chance to see the video that they posted on why they're proposing an NFL boycott, you just go to their page on Facebook. Ahm Zadik spelled AHMZADIK. So just search for Ahm Zadik and you can watch the video. So they are proposing NFL boycott for 2018 and explain to the people the reason why.
Okay, so once again, it's for those who follow football, it's no secret that they have created a rule against one of the NFL players in his protests against social injustices within America. And so as an organization, we stand in opposition to any organization or anything that we support that would silence our people's plight and the fight that people have against the things that affect us most dearly. Now, the boycott started and we decided to do these things when we seen that they created the rule that no player can kneel during the Star Spangled Banner. And so basically our position is that as long as they have a long-standing rule on the book, which is not long-standing at this point, but as long as they have a rule on the book that stops and says players can't kneel in their silent protests, speaking against the plight of all individuals and African Americans in particular, then we're going to continue to boycott the NFL.
Yeah. All right.
And this boycott pretty much started by us. We understand that people have been boycotting since last year and that different organizations have been taking a part in it. But we're most definitely trying to put this in full swing where people can stop and look and see, what we're doing and why we're doing what they're doing and make sure that rules like this don't continue to show up in other organizations that are clearly targeted toward one audience.
So now you mentioned that the rule is in place, but basically right now they're not enforcing the rule.
Correct.
So now the position that you put out to, y'all put out to boycott the NFL, obviously it was before the season started. So now people want to know, why you still proposing a boycott for the continuation of this season if the rule is not going to be enforced this season?
Well, we recognize that they're not enforcing the rule now, so they say. But the fact of the matter is that the rule is still on the books. And if they don't intend to enforce the rule, then why not remove the rule from the books? The other thing that I think that we all need to consider is that this particular rule was made specifically targeting this individual and the individuals that supported him in his stance, and it was made as a financial response to the backlash that they were receiving from last year when the boycott and the silent protest came to light, stemming from one individual and stretching out to two teams and even owners at some point. So it's actually a couple of different factors here that we need to consider. One factor is that they specifically made this rule to address this individual and to silence his voice as he was looking to make his stance known regarding social injustices. And the second part of it is, again, if the rule is still on the books, if they're not intending to enforce the rule, then they should just take the rule off the books.
So now, because totally y'all gonna be pretty much in the hot seat pretty much for this one. So now, like you mentioned, that you want them to take the rule off the books. So basically, you're proposing that the NFL boycott should be in effect until they remove the rule from the books, right?
All right.
So now, basically, if you think about it, that basically did for those that are boycotting the 2018 season is basically a wash, because the rule cannot be removed in the middle of the season. They would have to wait till the season's over in order to make any changes to rules. It's like when they had the situation with what is actually a catch. Like people were catching balls and replays showed that the receiver caught it, but there was a technicality in the rule, depending on how many steps they can make, whether they have full control of the ball, that would consider it a catch. Now, they couldn't change that rule in the middle of the season because technically that rule was in the book. So they waited till the season was over. This was 2 years ago. Then they rehashed the technical details of the rule in order to please everybody. So now with the situation with the rule, the NFL is saying that they're not enforcing it, but they technically cannot remove that rule this season until the season's over.
I hear what you're saying concerning that, but to compare rules for the game itself to rules that restrict people's socio-political right, you shouldn't invade anybody's socio-political right because they play the game of football. So this is why we protest, because the league didn't have the right to interfere with somebody's social expression. And the very fact that they went to that extent to say what a player could do or can't do to express their social political right, this is the reason why we should boycott. We should boycott that pattern of thinking. We should boycott the fact that they believe they should have the audacity to tell grown men, this is how you should express yourself, or this is how you should protest. So we have to kind of look at it beyond the fact that the NFL, the league, is making a rule and they can't abandon a rule midstream. We should kind of look at the fact that they have these rules in the first place. If you know anything about this country, a lot of times societies, they make up rules as they go along to create sense a level of control towards people. And we don't want to have people getting the impression all across this country that just because a person begins to express themselves that they have to restrict, or they have the right to restrict that level of expression. And it's a pattern that goes on in this country often with people in authority that feel that they can impose their will anytime they want. This is just one organization or one form of authority that's trying to impose their will on Black expression. We want to silence it all. But this is just one way we can actually address the situation and let the public know we want to make sure that we take some type of a stand. Now, by any means, to each his own. People are going to go and watch the football. It's not a crime to do so, but we want to show that there can be solidarity amongst people when it comes to standing up or standing with individuals who decide to express themselves for the benefit of their own people. Oftentimes, like when Muhammad Ali tried to stand up against being drafted, there were athletes that supported him, that were by his side, and there were athletes that kind of sold out, that decided they weren't going to stand with him, and maybe he should go to the army or whatever. But it was bigger than just him going to the army, shaking hands. He didn't want to do any of it. They told him that he's not going to go to war. He's just going to be there as a public figure, whatever, if he's drafted as a celebrity. But he didn't want to take a position that compromised his integrity by going to the war and making it seem like he agreed with what was going on in Vietnam. So, regardless of what, we wanted to make it understood to the public, regardless of what your view is. We have to make sure we stand up against these patterns of behavior towards authorities that feel that anytime Black people stand up for themselves, they stand up for a cause, and they use a platform to stand up for a cause, that they should be silenced, or there should be a rule against this and against that. Because it's his right to express his patriotism. It's his right to express his injustice, or his view of injustice in the world, and it's his right to intelligently and peacefully protest things that he feels that he can have an impact on and actually make a change in those matters. So we wish more people. Colin Kaepernick is just one, and I don't want it to make it seem like we're confining it just him, because there are a lot of athletes that do a lot of things that get subtle protests. There are people that may not like LeBron for the things that LeBron may say. There are people that may like, but we want to shut it all down. But this is just a start. This is just a way that we can use our voices to the masses to let them understand that there's enough of us that understand where we have solidarity, we do have power, we do have impact, we can make a change. And with everything, the world is not going to do it, but if enough of us stand up and make our voices heard, then there can be a real strong impact concerning these situations.
If I may add, if I may add, I'm not sure if that's the reason that the NFL is using on why they can't take that rule off the books now. But I think one of the couple of things that we need to consider. The first thing that we need to consider is that they dealt with this issue mid last season. And because of the strong opposition on either side, the NFL chose to wait until the end of the season to address that issue.
Right.
That was a choice that they made. And the reason that they made that choice is because they needed to wait till the season was over so that they can look at the bottom line as to what the results were when they were protesting and what the results were when the owners decided to take the stance not to protest. So I'm not exactly sure if that's the reason that the NFL is saying that they cannot remove that rule now.
No, I don't think that they're using that. I don't think they made a statement, period, about it. So I don't think that they're using that as a reason of why they can't remove the rule. But I just know that they cannot remove any rules. They cannot put in or remove any rules mid-season.
Which brings me to my second point, which is I'm going to go to the First Amendment. And the First Amendment clearly says that Congress, which is the legislative body of this country, shall not make a rule that abridges anybody's freedom of speech or religion, so on and so forth. So if the legislative body of this country cannot make such a rule, then that would indicate that every organization that call themselves are a part of this country also should not does not have the right to make that same rule to punish or admonish people for their freedom of speech. So now they made a rule that seemingly, and this is something that they're arguing in court back and forth, but they made a rule that seemingly violates the constitutional rights of any individual that chooses his right to protest. And I'll actually bring you to a second point. If you consider what happened right here in New York City when it came with the speed cameras, they said we cannot change the law about the speed cameras because the legislative body of New York State is not set to meet to a certain point, until a certain point. But what they actually did was they pushed and they pushed and they pushed because they felt the need for the speed cameras to be turned back on before school started. And that push called them to allow the legislative body to come back early in order to pass that vote. So when we want to find a way to make something right, then we can find that way to make it right.
Just everybody out there, once again, we're talking to members of Ahm Zadik who are proposing an NFL boycott for the 2018 season. So, you can always, type in your comments or your questions, in the chat room, whether on the Facebook or on any of the apps. You can also call us up, 718-393-5385. So, we all felt that this was an important issue that, should be brought to the forefront. With the gallery, we always have fun, but we always, as people that have been listening for, the past few years know that, we do try to bring in, serious matters as well. So being that, the NFL season just started, there's a lot of, situations happening with the protests of the national anthem over the past few years. We just mentioned, it was beyond Colin Kaepernick. But this year, there's a rule in effect which says that players cannot kneel or make any type of silent protest during the national anthem. They could stay in their locker rooms, when the national anthem is going on, but they cannot come out and perform any form of protest of the national anthem. So once again, Ahm Zadik, they're proposing this boycott. So if you go to their page on Facebook, you'll be able to see the video, but you also, they'll let you know more as we go along. So we just wanted to reiterating for those that are just checking in what we're discussing at this time. So, I know we're 3 weeks into the NFL season, so some of y'all have already, watched their games.
That's fine.
So those that are in New York, I believe that, I don't know how bad the New York Giants record is if you've been watching, but so I'm just going to explain it from my position, then I'll pose this question. So now, last season I didn't, I had a personal, well, I shouldn't say personal, but a lot of people were boycotting the NFL last year. So because Colin Kaepernick was looking for a job anywhere and nobody wanted to hire him. So now this is a different scenario because anybody could hire him anytime during the season. He doesn't have to be signed at the beginning of the season. So there was a protest all over boycotting the NFL until Colin Kaepernick was reinstated as a player anywhere.
Right.
So now, in regards to the boycott that you're doing for this year, why didn't y'all do this last year when everybody else was boycotting for his job? And actually,
Yeah, sure.
no, you have to switch this because I think that mic's not working. So, it's,
Okay.
yeah, because people aren't hearing you good on that mic.
Talk a little bit louder.
No, that something's wrong with that mic.
Okay.
So just
It's cool. It's plain and simple. The rule wasn't created at that point. Last year, while Colin Kaepernick had a job, he
what
was
a year before because he wasn't working last year.
the year before. And it's plain and simple like this. There's a trickle-down effect. If we stop and we look at it, before he took his stance and he kneeled during the Star Spangled Banner, people were actually considering him for trades. You have even the president of the Denver Broncos who stops and said they entertained a trade for him, but he denied it. So you can't have a case of collusion against a player to not hire him if you don't have him kneeling during the Star Spangled Banner. So I want us to understand this. There will be times where people stop and they fight back and people say, well, when this was going on, how come nobody said anything? Or while that was going on, how come nobody said anything? Well, sometimes when we stop and we look at the effects of everything that's happening and how they begin to treat people, that we stop and we say, this is clearly not something against just the player, but against a stance that the people were taking. And so, as my brother said earlier, it is definitely a cultural state in this country where once we're doing things against the establishment or perceive things against the establishment, that all of a sudden, that now they want to make rules in order to, in our opinion, deter us from speaking about the plights that happen against us. But the reality of the situation is, while he was on the San Francisco 49ers, and while he was kneeling, when he first did it, people were just like, oh, there's somebody kneeling during the Star Spangled Banner. But the thing is that when it picked up steam, that's when they stopped and they decided to do this. And the reality is that social injustices do go on in this country and that it needs to be discussed. And the fact is that they feel that they should take away the player's platform from speaking the things that's on their mind, and that's not right. Every player has the right to have their own views concerning what's happening in the country. And as long as they're not disrespecting the league or giving a bad name to the league and what they do, which is the greater conversation, then they should be able to protest the way they want to protest. And the last thing I'll say is that this is nothing new. Even during the 1959 Olympics, I believe that was the 1956, I believe I'm getting it wrong, that when the players then rose their hands in protest to stop and say solidarity, and they were speaking out against what was going on in Vietnam and the things that were happening in this country, that was an issue then also that eventually was accepted, but actually became synonymous with our plight as a people. So I stop and I say, there's people we understand, at first not understand why we're doing what we do. But the reality of the situation is at the end of the day, when we stop and we protest and we cause them to make valid change concerning things that affect us, it will actually be to our benefit down the road.
All right, so once again, just reminding everybody, we're talking to members of Ahm Zadik, who are proposing a boycott of the NFL season this year, because of the rule that was instituted and, prohibiting players from making any formal protests, of the national anthem. They can once again go in there, stay in the locker room before coming out. But so number for the studio was 718-393-5385. So if you could, if you have any other questions or any comments that you want to make, you can feel free to call us up. Quite a few people are making comments online. So I'll try to get to some of those comments as well. But feel free to call in and question or make comments. So beyond the NFL boycott, what plans or do Ahm Zadik have in terms of promoting the message that you're trying to bring? Because I know the message that you're trying to bring goes beyond the NFL. The NFL may be the platform to bring forth your message, but the season will be over, February, but the plight that you're talking about doesn't end in February.
Correct.
So what goals, what objectives, does the group have?
You mentioned earlier that you yourself and other organizations were boycotting the NFL from last year. And you have some organizations that were boycotting the NFL from the year before. So one of the things that we're looking to do as a community and faith-based organization is we're looking to network and connect with all of those different organizations that are boycotting for the variety of reasons that they're boycotting. So we decided to boycott for the rule that they instituted. Other individuals and other organizations decided to boycott for a variety of different reasons. So now it comes to the point where, because the bottom line of it all is social injustice. It's not NFL, it's not Colin Kaepernick, it's social injustice. The bottom line is that we have too long seen our young men, and in many cases, our young women, be slain in the streets. And we want to take up a voice against that. And one of the best ways to take up a voice against that is to come together and unify and organize with people who feel the same way that we feel, so that we can take up the banner of social injustice, which is what the main issue is. And so what we plan to do is we hope to, in forums like this, we've put the information out, disseminated on our variety of various social media channels. And what we're looking to do is we are looking to network with other individuals so that we can sit and we can talk on how we as a collective unit can come to talk about how we can bring our issues regarding social injustices to the forefront. One of the very interesting boycotts that we had in modern day history was the Montgomery bus boycott. And at that point, everybody wasn't taking the bus. You had individuals who had cars, but the people who were not taking the bus understood the need to support the people who were taking the bus, to come together and organize a movement so that we can show the Montgomery Bus Company that we're not going to allow you to continue to treat us and our people that way. And so what we're looking to do is for all of those organizations who are unhappy with the way the justice system is treating these numerous cases now of police brutality. We have the stand your right, stand your ground law, where people are getting murdered in those types of instances. So for all of the people who are not happy and choose to no longer tolerate all of those types of social injustices, those are the people who we want to network with, we want to talk to, so that we can put a unified petition towards the U.S. justice system to say, hey, listen, you need to take a closer look at this because we're not happy as a unit. And in this particular case, it started with the NFL, because one of the things that organizations in this country are famous for is once we as a people look to make a stand, to take a stand, they look for some sort of medium to try to minimize our voice and minimize the stance that we were taking. That's what happened. I know we don't like to talk about it, but that's what Jim Crow was. Jim Crow was a way, the Jim Crow laws were a way to minimize the progress that we were doing as a people. And if you think about it, this seems to mimic the same Jim Crow attributes, because as soon as, like Maura Yitzhak indicated, as soon as the protests began to take steam and people started to recognize it and it started to gain media attention, that's when it became an issue. And that's when he was not able to gain employment after that. So it's a systemic issue that we need to address, and we can only address that issue together.
I just want to read out some of the comments that people are making online. Ava, Anika, and this is some of the comments that were made earlier, so it may not seem exactly in line with who we are in the point of discussion. She said this is Pluto, and this is a word I actually never heard before. Plutocracy. Plutocracy. The 1% wants to control the masses, and the way it's doing this is by sending a message: either you shut up while we continue to oppress people,
Absolutely.
or you will be blackballed from being able to support yourself in this capitalistic system. I don't know where Ava lives. Hazel has actually lived in Canada. So she was saying that black people in America don't even know it. She said she saw a video with a guy wearing a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and the video showed two young men fighting, and he did nothing to stop them, and they were just recording the fight. Dave says it is time for us to rise. A game is a slide. There is a bigger picture normalized. And let me see if anything else. Dave once again also said, we are not the establishment. And are we not there? No. Are we not there? No, we are not the establishment. And there is no monsters. We create them in our thoughts. And Sonia says when she watches, Sonia's in the UK. She says when she watches the NFL, she sees black players on the pitch. So why should they treat people this way? That was just a comment. But now regarding that, not specifically what Sonia just said. Now, there was a question that says that the NFL employs 80%. 80% of the workforce is black. So by instituting a boycott on the NFL, are you not interfering with the income of black people?
The way the NFL and the collective bargaining agreement works is the majority of the financial compensation goes to the owners of the NFL. The players have their contract, and the players are contractually obligated to make the money that they're contractually obligated to make. That's what they get paid. That's their pay. All of the rest of that goes to the owners of the NFL. And so a boycott of the NFL doesn't affect black players. A boycott of the NFL affects the bottom line of the financial owners of the NFL. That's who that boycotts. Because when we choose to not watch games and they don't get the televised ratings that they anticipated, and those stations are unable to produce the commercials because people aren't watching like they expected, that's a financial impact against the NFL. When we choose to not buy NFL merchandise, that's a financial impact against the NFL. When we choose not to go to a football game with our family of 4 and spend close to $1,000 for 1 4-hour afternoon of football, that doesn't affect the players, that affects the NFL. Part of the reason that the players are not boycotting, this is similar to what happened with the NBA players when Donald Sterling made the comments that he made. The players did not want to play, but they were under contract to play, or else they would face the backlashes that would come from them not abiding by their contract. Players get paid based on contract. All of the extra revenue goes to the NFL, and the NFL owners, who are the ones who made this rule without consent of anyone. So the financial backlash goes to the NFL. Players are contractually obligated to make what they're obligated to make, regardless to whether the NFL produces a profit or whether they lose money.
Now, Trump was one of the people that also proposed a NFL boycott. So now, and this may be a trick question, with your boycott and Trump's boycott, do you feel that you're moving in line with what he is instituting or what he wants to propose? Because he proposed also NFL boycott, and he's also taken claim for the dip in ratings for the NFL during the first 3 weeks.
So I'm gonna just make it our position clear. Absolutely not. In no way, shape, or form. For those who know me, my view on Trump is he's a constant antagonist and constantly attempts to switch the narratives. This is the reality of the situation. The NFL knew this situation was brewing for a long time. And because they failed to act properly on it, that's why the ratings are dipping. And anybody can take claim to anything that's happening, but the reality of the situation is when we turn our TVs off from football, it shows in the NFL ratings. And that's what it is. So it's people collectively saying, I no longer want to be a part of what they're doing to silence our people. And we have to have our voices heard. Listen, this is the reality. Anything that we do in this country is going to be met with opposition. People are always going to ask why we're boycotting. People are always going to claim somebody else is being affected. But the reality is that when people stop and strike, when people stop and boycott, when people decide to stop and march, it's because there's something that's so great going on that there needs to be a stop to what's happening. And the reality is that the police brutality is not being addressed in this country. And the reality is that nobody was saying anything about anything till somebody stopped and took a stand for it. This is a man who had a $100 million contract and decided to risk it all because of the plight of his people. And the reality is that from the aesthetics, from the genetics, if you stop and look at him, he could have passed as a white man. Nobody would have questioned it, and he could have went on living his life. Point being is that at some point there has to be some sacrifice. And at some point, somebody has to stop and say, hey, listen, we need to put a stop to these things. If the boycott took 2 days, or if the boycott took 4 years, at some point we have to do something to ensure that the NFL understands, and any other sports body understands, that if they intend to silence us, then we're going to respond by pulling back our earning powers from them so that they won't continue to silence our people.
So now,
if I may, it's funny that you mentioned Trump and Trump's boycott, his call for the boycott, and him taking credit for the ratings. As I understand from the media outlets, Trump addressed the UN Assembly.
Yes.
And he took credit for, as being in his 2 years of presidency, being more effective and instituting more policies and change and positive change in America than any other president in the United States. And the cameras and the microphones caught numerous national leaders laughing at the statement. Right. So to answer your question, Trump says boycott. I say, hey, yes, boycott. We say boycott. I say, hey, yes, boycott. Because the fact of the matter remains is that the NFL, when faced with all options, when faced with all options, had a choice to make. And they took the time, they waited till the season was over, and they hoped that what we would do, which is what we normally do, we allow time to pacify our concerns. And so as they let time pacify our concerns, and they went and they had a closed door vote, and they made a decision. So if Trump boycotts, good, because they shouldn't have flip-flopped on the issue. We're boycotting, absolutely, because they should not have flip-flopped on the issue, because they have the opportunity to do the right thing, and they made a choice to do something opposite.
I know somebody tried to call in earlier, and just briefly, if you want to call, 718-393-5385. And just on a lighter note, Uziel, who you all know, I mean, he listens. What I mentioned, I don't know what the record is. He actually mentioned the record of the Giants, so I don't.
I don't think it's that good.
he said it's they're 1 and 2.
Right.
They did 1 and 2. So I know we make jokes. Like even
I
last
wonder
year.
who watched those games that they lost.
Right. Boycott the NFL 2018.
So I'm just make a statement for everybody, where they can find, get your information, how they can contact y'all, get information on, what the organization, more of what the organization is about, and where they can apply if they want to support the cause or join in with the cause.
First, I would like to thank Benjamin for allowing us to be on this platform and use this platform to get across to his public. And I'd like to thank him for the partnership that he's always showed with Ahm Zadik throughout the years. And just thanking the creator for allowing us to even have the mind state to go off and push and do more things to show the public in our community that there are men and women taking a stance against certain issues, as Israelites, as Black people who are concerned with how our children are going to be raised and the impact that they're going to see.
Right.
So my statement is education. I think that with today, you have 2018, you have a boycott happening now, but I don't think a lot of people are aware of a lot of these things that happened in the past and how these small things that weren't addressed turned into big monsters. And I would have people look into the Montgomery boycott, look into the reason why they did it, look into the fact that there were people that didn't support the Montgomery boycott, but you have to still do it in order to be successful. You have to have that level of solidarity. There's people that hated Malcolm when Malcolm was speaking, Black people I'm talking about, who hated Malcolm when Malcolm was protesting the atrocities of white America. And when he died, everybody was crying, boo hoo hoo, Malcolm is gone, right? So we want to make sure that we have the impact now so that people can understand. I'm not worried about people catching up. The right people will catch up. The right people will understand the point of what we're doing. And if you don't know, it's not about entertainment. It's not about our feelings. Sometimes issues go beyond those things. And I think the society that we live in, they play on the fact that we're numb. We're numb with entertainment. We're numb with having fun. We're numb with not being serious about certain issues. And they will play on that and use that to exploit us. Like Samar Zakar said, is that, they expect us to be out of tune in a certain amount of time. So we want to be able to stay in tune on these issues. The problems that are happening with police brutality are ongoing. They have been happening in this country for quite some time. And we want to make sure that we continue to push the envelope concerning these issues. And yes, we don't want to lose our life. Nobody wants to lose their life, but some things are worth losing your life for. And we want to make sure that we push these issues. We want to make sure that there's always a platform that we can use to express ourselves concerning these issues, concerning the injustice in America. I would ask people to read a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Reason why this book is essential, it kind of puts the relationship between oppressors and oppressed people into perspective. The oppressed people have to fight for their freedom every single day. In their jobs, in their education, in their marriages, they're always fighting for their freedom because everything is taken away from oppressed people, whether you realize it or not. You may drive a nice car, live in a nice home, you may get a good loan, but you still live in the underclass of individuals who make 300, 400 times more than you actually do, and they have the say-so over your life. Part of that, the parallel to it, is that the oppressors don't know how to not oppress. It's part of their lifestyle, it's part of their culture, and what Pedagogy of the Oppressed will teach you is that not only if we free ourselves, we free the oppressor from his lack of humanity. And oftentimes what you see with people in these positions of authority is that they are practicing a lack of humanity because no one would ever take away their right. They wouldn't understand if somebody took away their right to freely express themselves, but they view people often as non-human. And we want to make sure that our humanity is ever present. Our humanity is always being pushed to the forefront, that the color of our skin has nothing to do with whether or not we're human beings. We're human beings created in the image of God. And whether they want to realize it or not, we're going to have to fight for our right to exist as human beings on this earth, the same way Malcolm said. And, they're not going to give up that right because there's people that believe that money is power. Money gives you the right to do whatever you want to do. And money gives you the right to tell others what they can do with their life. And we want to make sure that's understood to us in the public and our future, our children, that that's not the case.
Just want to just big up DJ Sean, the CEO of Creative Power Gen Radio, and just thanking him for he's actually liking what he's hearing right now, and also just want to thank you for the little bit of overtime that he's allowing us to have right now. And with the little bit of overtime that we do have, we do have a caller on the line. Caller, welcome to the gallery.
Hey, what's going on, y'all?
What's going
This is
on?
Uzal.
All right.
What's up, man?
What's going on? I don't know why Ben trying to throw me underneath the bus. I just gave the record. I know the record. That's it. I know the record.
So you call it
That's
Clay,
it.
you call it
That's
Clay
all I
name.
was calling for.
You call it Clay. So we thank you for calling.
So wait, you stand with us in boycott football?
I'm down with y'all 110%.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what's up.
All right. Thank you for calling.
All right.
So then, Yamin, if I may, for those who want to search for us, we are at ahmzadik.org, ahmzadik.org. You can also like us on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. We're also on Instagram. And eventually, I do believe we're getting to the YouTube page, and we'll be having content there. Anybody looking to become part of our organization can please message us there and just tell us that they're interested in what we're doing. There are a couple of different things that we plan on doing in the near future. We do plan to have a speaking engagement in February. Some of the ideas being tossed around are 400 years since the slave ships landed on these shores, what has changed, and discussing the black codes and doing a trip. A couple of years back, we did the trip. Well, last year, Super Bowl Sunday.
Actually, that was the year before.
Year before?
Yeah, year before.
Okay, the year before, Super Bowl Sunday. See where we was at.
Right.
We did the trip to the Smithsonian. And so, in conjunction with other organizations. And so, as we stop and we do this, we're trying to do things where we get people to maybe, and we're bouncing ideas around, to the Lynching Museum in Alabama, to the Blacks and Wax Museum, I believe, in Maryland, and different things that will educate and edify our people to the plight of what has going on in this country. So anybody interested in being a part of that, being a part of the movement, and want to be a part of a community-based organization, whether you're here in Brooklyn, New York, or outside abroad, and you want to give us your support, please like us on the page. Please send us a message. Somebody will get in contact with you, and we'll let you know how you can be involved.
We'll have the regular info email back up, but we do have ahmzadik77@gmail.com that can be used. So that's ahmzadik77@gmail.com. That can be, if you need to email anything, any requests, whatever, any inquiries about membership as well.
And just to add to what my colleague said, one of the other things that we're looking to do is, as he mentioned, we're entertaining the idea of 400 years on these shores. But the other ideas that we're entertaining is we're actually going to be giving some of our youth, our own children, some of the youth in our organization, we're going to be giving them assignments to not only research the 400 years that we've been captive and landed on these shores here, but also the years and the times where our people made that boat stop in Jamaica, and where they made that boat stop in Cuba, and in the Dominican Republic, and in Brazil, and in Trinidad and Tobago, and all of those different boat stops that those slave ships made. And what we want to do is we want to know how long those slaves were in those captivities. And what we also want to do is we want to know how those same captivities, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, all of those places that we mentioned, how they chose to rise up against their oppressors to become a free people. And the funny thing about it is how the superpowers at that time responded to them and those organizations. Why is that doing that? That's me?
Yeah, it's that Mike.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And how the superpowers of those of these countries rather than support those Caribbean countries from in their independence, but how they actually set embargoes and sanctions against them that still affect those countries to this day. Right. Haiti was one of the first countries in the Caribbean to gain their independence, and yet Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the Caribbean. We need to understand why that is. Right. We need to understand why Haiti, who had earthquakes and all types of atrocities, and yet Haiti was referred to as a S-hole country? Right. Why is that? Why do the superpowers of this country, rather than look to uplift of this world, rather than uplift these countries to help them to be able to prosper and succeed on their own after they took all of the resources from them, but they rather continue to set embargoes against them and continue to take advantage of them. Same with Puerto Rico. I failed to mention Puerto Rico. And you see the rift that's happening with the governor of Puerto Rico and some of the mayors in Puerto Rico with the United States, like right now, because they're like, well, we're American citizens as well. Right. So why can't we get the same treatment and the same aid that they got when Harvey hit when Harvey hit the United States, and now that and now that North Carolina was affected? Why we can't get the same country, and why is it a year after Hurricane Maria and they did the helicopter flew over and they saw hundreds of thousands of unused, unopened bottled water just lined up right along the shore that nobody chose to distribute, yet people are still hungry and people are still without power. So what we want to do is we want to understand why a lot of these things are happening. And I think if you look at our Ahm Zadik page through the various mediums that they give you, and also through the DCB page, which we're going to be putting up a link to the DCB page so you can watch some of the videos that we do on the DCB page, because we talk about a lot of these different things and we want to get different community members to understand and recognize why these things are happening to us. And more so, understanding why they're happening is one thing, but more so, how can we rise above it as a community of people and do better?
So once again, everybody that's listening, we're talking to the members of Ahm Zadik, and we were speaking about their proposal for NFL boycott for this year. So whether you were watching the first 3 weeks, you got the information now that you can take in for yourselves. Whether you want to join in and support the boycott of the NFL. And when we think about things that we look back at history, small statements that were made in the 60s and the 70s, back then they started off small. So, people that may be listening or watching now, and they're looking at it like, well, what's that going to do? You never know what one movement in one area can do for the overall movement. We have listeners, in the UK watching, Canada, and, they're, based on, what they're typing, they understand the situation. They may not be feeling it the same way that we're feeling it in the US, but, basically, like, they were saying, we're all the same people. And, we all had that connection, wherever we are. So, we thank the members of Ahm Zadik for being here. And once again, everybody, just feel free to, hit up their pages and, support. If it's not the NFL boycott, but you're a type of person that just has some sort of thought towards, the upliftment of your own people, just join in on something. And, they're making themselves available for, comments, any suggestions on what can be done so that collectively, things can happen. Small, once again, small, movements grew into big movements.
The Gallery every Tuesday. Miss Stacy, Nicole Renee, and Badman Benny.